everyone, I finally found time to make my fertility or infertility journey video. Basically, a little bit of background. When I was 18, I was diagnosed with PCOS, just like everyone else. I was diagnosed because I was getting one period a year from when I was 14, and they were super heavy and lasted about 2 weeks at a time. My hormones were all over the place and I was described as severe polycystic. I was put on the pill, and basically I was on the pill until I got married in 2013. In 2008, I met my husband Daniele, who is the greatest gift of my life, and I couldn't wait to start a family. My gynecologist told me at the time that I should look at having a baby sooner rather than later, but I wanted to do the right thing and get married and be financially stable first. So basically that's what we did. In 2013, when we were 25, we got married, finally, and I thought, great, it's time to have a baby. I finally can have a baby, as I've been dreaming of it since I was 15 years old. I went off the pill during my honeymoon and waited for Aunt Flo to arrive. I finally had a breakthrough bleed and I thought, great, let's start trying. It was 150 days later until I had another one. And then I was waiting about 180 days for another. Luckily, a few months later, I got a referral to a specialist. I went into my doctor's office and said, I need a referral to a fertility specialist. They asked the usual questions. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in Australia, you have to be trying for at least a year before you can actually see a specialist. Luckily, because I had PCOS, I kind of sweet talked my doctor into saying, well, look, I need help now. In July, I saw a gynecologist who actually referred me to herself at the fertility clinic, Fertility Specialist South in Applecross in Western Australia. Which, side note, they are the greatest people ever, and I thank them every day for everything they did for us. In August, I was sent for a pelvic ultrasound and blood tests, and my husband also had blood tests and a sperm sample. His sample and all his blood work, of course, came back perfect. We knew that they would. Mine came back that I had severe polycystic ovarian syndrome, which was confirmed since I already knew I had it. They explained it as severe as my AMH levels were extremely high, meaning I had a large egg reserve. They also said that I had endometriosis, which I kind of knew that I did as my mum had it and just from my symptoms when I did get my period. Before I was able to start any fertility treatment, I had to go through a HSG. I do want to do a video about my HSG experience, but basically to sum up, it's where they blow up a balloon in the uterus and inject a dye through your tubes, and it's basically just to see that your anatomy works, there's no blockages, that the dye flows freely through your fallopian tubes. So that all came back clear, that was perfect, so I was able to move on and start my fertility treatment. In September, I started an ovulation induction cycle using Gonal-F, which is a follicle stimulating hormone. I injected for 34 days and my estrogen levels were baseline until about day 32, when all of a sudden, it was like overnight, I grew follicles. At day 34, I went in there and they said, look, this cycle has to be cancelled. You've actually grown 8 follicles, 8 mature follicles. So I had to use my trigger, which was Overdrill, and basically wait for my period to come and then I could start a new cycle. As you can imagine, I was devastated. After 34 days of injecting myself, I didn't even have a chance. We didn't even have a shot at having a baby. You know, you invest all that time, the money, and the pain and everything, the physical and mental pain, just to have it cancelled like that. No chance. So at the time, I imagined thinking, surely a failure would be easier than this. Anyway, we went on to the next cycle. I was all refreshed, ready for the next cycle. I got my period when I was in holiday in Bali, and I was like, yes, that's it. I can come home, I can start injecting, fantastic. Because I had overstimulated the cycle before, they gave me a transvaginal scan first, just to make sure everything was okay. And they in fact found a giant cyst about 4 centimeters that was just being fed with estrogen. So my estrogen levels were 9,000. They said, sorry, you're gonna have to go on the pill for the next month and just to get your estrogen and progesterone and everything back down to baseline. Again, I was devastated. I had to wait another month to be able to just get one shot. But I went on the pill and I just waited. I waited for the next month to arrive, and luckily my period came and I was able to start again. I started the new cycle, and this cycle I injected for 40 days. I was actually on holiday down south in Dunsborough when I got the phone call, and they basically said, "Oh my God, can you come in tomorrow for a scan? Your estrogen has all of a sudden risen." They were used to it taking a long time, and because my ultrasound and my scan before was showing nothing, all I did was have a blood test that day. I was actually down south on a holiday because it was between Christmas and New Year's. I'd actually had to drive up to Bunbury to have a blood test, and I remember at the time saying, "Look, I'm at day 40, nearly day 40, surely I have to have a scan as well." But because my estrogen was so baseline all of the times before, they just gave me a blood test. So I remember being at some sort of water park, and I got the phone call, and basically it was panic. It was, "Oh my goodness, can you please come tomorrow morning for a scan? Your estrogen has all of a sudden risen." And I was like, oh my God. I was not used to things actually happening, and I'd basically given up. So we drove up the next morning, and I had a scan, and I had 2 mature follicles. Only 2. It was so good. And my estrogen levels were perfect. So they basically said, "Okay, you can trigger on New Year's Eve." So at the time we thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Like, how miraculous. I can trigger New Year's Eve. Like, how fun, start the new year with a bang. So I triggered New Year's Eve, and we actually got a chance to try. So we tried. I think we were told to have intercourse for the next 3 days. So yeah, we had an opportunity to actually have a baby. So it had taken months, but we finally had an opportunity to actually try for a baby. Of course, that cycle failed, unfortunately, but I actually felt good in a way because we had a chance. It was our first chance in months. Even though I'd been injecting for over 120 days, it was our first chance. So I was excited to start again, obviously disappointed, but I was excited to start again. So we started the next month, and while I was injecting, I actually said to the clinic, "Can I please get the ball rolling for IVF, just in case this cycle doesn't work?" I was starting to feel, it was touch and go whether I was going to overstimulate or not, and I couldn't take another failed cycle or another cancelled cycle. In Australia, again, I'm not sure about other countries, but we have a policy where you have to go to an information evening, and I was told that I had to go to compulsory counselling, but we never actually ended up having to do that. So I'm not sure what that's about, but they did say that we could go if we wanted, and it was free. Well, it was included in our IVF costs, but we didn't end up doing that. So we did our information evening. We were really excited. Meanwhile, I was still injecting for my ovulation induction cycle. I had a day 21 scan, which of course was silly because I was still injecting, but I did have my day 21 scan. Basically, I was ready to start IVF if the previous cycle failed. The previous cycle did fail, but I actually didn't really mind because, well, I obviously did, but I didn't really mind because I was excited. I had a plan in place, and I knew that I was going somewhere. I wasn't just going to be doing another ovulation induction cycle. I was starting IVF. So then we started IVF. Because of my high AMH levels, they were really tempted for me to do IVM, which is in vitro maturation. So basically, they take your immature follicles and they mature them themselves in the lab just to make sure that they're doing it under a controlled environment. They ended up letting me do normal IVF, but they started me on their lowest dose that they have ever started a patient on. So I started on 87.5 units of gonal F, whereas normally people start on over 150. That was still higher than I'd ever gotten. The highest I'd ever gotten was 50 units. So after about a week, I started to grow a lot of follicles, and they actually lowered me back down to 75, which again, they couldn't believe how low that was, but I was actually starting to grow a lot of follicles. After about 25 days, they checked and I'd had over about 50 follicles there. Basically, they told me that I had to have another scan 3 days later because if I had grown too many more, it would be cancelled, obviously, because it would be quite dangerous. 3 days later, I did have my scan and I had my blood test, and my estrogen was over 9,000, but they deemed me safe enough to have egg collection and continue. They did say that it would be a freeze-all cycle though, as I was at a high risk for OHSS, which is ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So on the 18th of March 2015, I had egg collection. They collected 32 eggs, so I think it was about 40 follicles, but 32 eggs. Of those 32 eggs, 18 were fertilized. On day 3, there were 20, as 2 decided to split, so I've got identical twins in there somewhere. When I had overstimulated, I had to keep taking about 10 more of my Ovulation, which was the drug I used to stop ovulation before my egg collection. So I had to keep going with that for about an extra 10 days. And if anyone's taken Ovulation, there's those really thick needles. I also had to take cabergoline, which was also a drug that suppresses your hormones. I was also put on Provera to bring on my period. I then had to go on the pill for a month before I could finally transfer my embryo, my perfect grade A embryo, on the 22nd of May 2015. I have a video in my channel called What I Did for My Successful IVF FET Cycle, if you'd like to know what I did for my transfer cycle, for my successful transfer cycle. I had my beta test on the 3rd of June 2015 and my HCG was 833, my estrogen was 5,160 and my progesterone was 266. I then had a repeat beta 7 days later, so on the 10th of June, and my HCG was 7,423. So it was successful. I was finally pregnant. Words can't describe what that feels like. It finally worked, and even though IVF was the hardest thing that we ever had to go through, it was definitely the best thing we ever did. Seeing that embryo, seeing the picture of the embryo and then seeing it actually being transferred back into my body was the best thing. You know, it was incredible. We came out of that appointment, out of that room, just in awe of science, in awe of what we can do nowadays, you know, and we saw the light go back into me, you know, we saw it being transferred in, and it's just incredible. And then to know that that embryo, that little ball of cells, stuck and was going to become our baby. So on the 5th of February this year, I gave birth via emergency C-section to our son Milan, and even to this day, I look at him every day and I think, how are you mine? How are you that ball of cells that we saw go back into me? How? And I look at him every day and I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for everything I went through, because I know that there is not going to be a day that I take it for granted. There's not going to be a day that I don't look at him and think, you are a miracle. Looking into the future, we plan to transfer another embryo in May 2017. We figured that although we don't know how long it's going to take for the transfer to be successful, we'd like a 2-year gap between our children. Obviously, if we're blessed with some sort of miracle in the meantime, then that'll be fantastic. When you're basically told that you cannot have a baby naturally, then you take anything you can get. Even if there's a small gap between children, I'll take anything I can get. But the plan is to start fertility treatment again next May. I just want to say to those who are still suffering, to those who are still going through treatment, keep going, keep pushing. The sooner you quit, the longer it's going to take to get your miracle. So push through. Feel what you need to feel, because sometimes you need to cry. Sometimes you need to cry all the way home from your appointments. I used to cry in the shower, so at least it gave me a time limit, and once the shower was finished, that was it. So cry if you need to cry, but then wake up the next day motivated. Wake up the next day ready to keep going, because the faster you push through, the more you push through, the quicker you're going to get that baby. I'm always here, so please comment or message me on anything if you need any sort of help or support, because I know what it's like. going through it again next year, it's not going to be made any easier just because I have a baby. It's still going to the IVF. It's still the whole treatment. It's still the whole experience again. So please, anyone that's going through fertility treatment, just know that there is a community out there that is there for each other, that is there to support you, that is there for you to rant to or ask questions. So please utilize that. Know that you're not alone. You might not know anyone around you that's going through it or that understands, but there are so many people online that know exactly what you're going through. So good luck and baby dust to you all. Bye.